Dear Aron Ra, Dillahunty, eminent atheist thinkers, Carl Sagan, you say there is no God. Well, how do you explain this story right here? There is no religion, no other religion except Christianity with stories like this. No one ever mocked or rejected becoming a Hindu and was killed for it by God. No one ever rejected becoming a Mormon or becoming a Muslim when they felt the invitation to do so. And no one ever did that and was killed for rejecting those religions. Aron Ra, Dillahunty, how in the fuck do you explain this story if there is no God? This story would make you think twice about your atheism. I want an answer. Unless you're too chicken shit, listen to this story and give me an answer. Unless this make you really realize there really is a God. I laugh at you. Come on, give me an answer. If you're really atheists, and not just angry at God.
I was holding a revival meeting in Taylor's at the Southern Victory Baptist Church. Dr. Ed Harrison was the pastor, one of the most godly men I've ever known.
Atheists.
Two boys drove up riding piggyback on a motorcycle. They find
Not the story. Hold on.
one of the deacons there was, and instead of coming in, they began to curse. That until they entered into a curve. Said I saw the approaching automobile. Off on the right side of his head and his shoulder.
Come on, get the damn story.
Revival sponsored by the 27 was conducting a never.
Here, this story.
I was conducting a revival, associational-wide revival sponsored by the 27 Baptist churches in that parish in Louisiana.
This story, Aron Ra, Dillahunty. This story. If there's no God, how the hell do you explain this story away?
You know, in Louisiana, they do not have counties like we have in North Carolina. They have parishes.
Dumbasses.
And this was a parish-wide revival. And we had come to the last night of the meeting, and I was preaching this sermon, and the meeting was being held in the rodeo arena. And as I preached, on the last tier of seats, over to my right, on the last row, top seats, were three men that I'd never seen before. And they had laughed and made fun. Now, preacher, it has never bothered me when a little baby starts crying, the mother gets up and walks out. That don't bother me. But under God, I cannot preach if I see two young people laughing. I cannot preach if I see anybody mocking. It just somehow or another takes it away from me. 3 times. I stopped. And I said the last time, if you men don't want to hear me preach, a lot of these people have come from miles to be here tonight, and they do, would you just get up and walk out of the arena? One of them said, if you think you're man enough to come up here and put us out, you just come up here. And I prayed a prayer. Never have prayed before, never have prayed since. I said, dear Jesus, let me backslide for 15 minutes. And I promise you, Lord, if you'll let me backslide for 15 minutes, I'll go up there and beat the devil out of all 3 of them.
Lord Jesus Christ, can I please have you back ahead?
And God said, I didn't call you to fight, I called you to preach. He said, you turn them over to me. And I did. And they continued to mock all the way through the sermon. We had over 400 people to walk down that aisle that night and give their hearts to Jesus Christ. I fully intended to never show them enough attention to address them again. But just as I was ready to pronounce the benediction, my arm came up. Preacher, did anything ever come out that you hadn't planned to say? That you couldn't help but say it? Has that ever happened to you, brother? How many of you preachers here have ever had something just come out that you didn't have in your notes and it just came out? Yes, every preacher, every God-called preacher has. And my arm alarm just came out, and I said, I do not know who you three gentlemen are. But all three of you stepped over God's deadline, God signed your death warrant, and God's going to kill all three of you. That was about 10:15 Sunday night. At 8 o'clock the next morning, I didn't know who these men were. They were three businessmen. One of them put the key in the door of his office on Main Street, Ringo, Louisiana, and dropped dead. At 11:30, the second man started across the street to a little restaurant to have his lunch from his office, and a lady was driving up the street and almost ran over him. She said he just walking along normal, fell flat on his face, and died right there in the street. At 5:30 that afternoon, the third man was sitting in his office, and he said to his secretary, my two friends are in hell, and before the sun goes down, I'll join them. And pitched out at his feet a corpse. My wife was with me in the revival. We had closed the revival meeting on that Sunday night, and we had driven.
Aron Ra, Matt Dillahunty. Did you hear those stories? That man knew he was. That third man knew that man, hostile to Christianity, knew he was about going to die. He just knew, he had inner knowledge that he knew he was going to die. Where did that inner knowledge come from? It wasn't just a fluke because he died. Aron Ra, Matt Dillahunty, are you too chicken to tackle this story? Maybe you atheists are really dumb after all. Or maybe you atheists know there's a God after all. And, just suppress it. Use your mind's powerful denial. I mock you, three little softies, if you can't solve this riddle. Stupid asses. I will play the story. No, I won't. Yeah, I will.
In the door of his office on Main Street, Ringo, Louisiana, and dropped dead.
Listen
at
to this.
11:30, the second man started across the street to a little restaurant to have his lunch from his office, and a lady was driving up the street and almost ran over him. She said he just walking along normal, fell flat on his face, and died right there in the street. At 5:30 that afternoon, the third man was sitting in his office, and he said to his secretary, my two friends are in hell, and before the sun goes down, I'll join them. And pitched out at his feet a corpse.
Did you hear that?
Secretary, at 5:30 that afternoon, the third man was sitting in his office, and he said to his secretary, my two friends are in hell, and before the sun goes down, I'll join them.
Aron Ra, Matt Dillahunty. Maybe there is a God after all. You better hope there's not, because if there is, you're gonna go to hell and join those three people who are burning in hell. But then again, you're too chicken shit to try to debunk this story. Or you'll debunk it, but it won't be truly debunked. You just say it never really happened. Because you can't stand that what happened, what he said had really happened. It had serious implications for you. You pig-headed atheists.